Thank you for keeping my son alive despite your condition. I vow to protect you from now.
The royal decree was already signed when Talia discovered she was carrying the heir to the throne. Blood oath or not, Pack law didn't recognize bastards born of forbidden bloodlines. And she had broken every single rule the moment she let Alexandros touch her that winter night when the moon bled red. Now, 3 years later, she hummed ancient lullabies while her daughter's small fingers traced the scars on her arms, the ones that marked her as Omega, as outcast, as the woman who should have died the night the Alpha King's true mate arrived at the palace gates. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. Because what comes next will break something inside you the way it broke me. The Council of Elders called for her head on the morning of the harvest moon. Not because she existed. Not even because she'd lain with their king. But because the child, little Callista, with her father's golden eyes and her mother's defiant spirit, had started to shift. 3 years old. Something that hadn't happened in their bloodline for 6 generations. Which meant she wasn't just any child. She was the prophecy they'd tried to bury. Talia had been living in the outer villages for these 3 years, surviving on the mercy of humans who didn't know what she was, working in the healer's cottage where she ground herbs and delivered babies and pretended her heart hadn't been ripped from her chest the day Alexandros married Ione. The king's true mate, chosen by the gods, blessed by the moon, everything Talia could never be. The wedding had been magnificent, they said. Talia had heard about it from travelers. 3 days of celebration. The Alpha King had stood at the altar in ceremonial armor, his dark hair bound with golden thread. His jaw set in that way she remembered too well, the expression he wore when he was burying his feelings so deep even he couldn't find them anymore. Ione was beautiful. Course she was. Descended from the ancient line of Sparta, a warrior princess with hair like midnight and eyes that could cut through stone. She was everything a queen should be. Fierce, political, cunning. And according to the bond that sang through the pack links, she was Alexandros's perfect match. The gods had spoken. The bond had snapped into place. And Talia, hiding in a human village with a swelling belly, had felt it through the severed connection she still carried like a phantom limb. The moment Alexandros pledged himself to Ione, something inside Talia had shattered so completely she'd collapsed in the middle of the market square, clutching her stomach, screaming without sound. An old woman had taken her in that night. No questions. Just held her while she bled. Not the baby, thank the fates, but something else. Something deeper. Her wolf had gone silent. Like it had chosen death over watching their mate bond to another. But Callista had survived. Born 2 months later in a freezing cottage, with only that old woman's gnarled hands to catch her. Talia had pushed for 6 hours, certain she would die, half hoping she would. And then she'd heard it. That first cry, sharp and furious and alive. She'd wept. Not from relief. From grief. Because Callista had Alexandros's eyes. And Talia knew she'd never be able to look at her daughter without seeing the man who'd promised her forever, and then walked away when destiny called his name. The old woman had died that winter. Talia never learned her true name. But she'd left the cottage to Talia in a will that no one contested because no one cared about property in the forgotten villages where the pack's protection didn't reach. For 3 years Talia had hidden. Had raised Callista in silence. Had taught her to never shift, never show her eyes, never speak of her father. Had woken screaming from nightmares where Alexandros's wolf hunted them through snow-dark forests. Not to embrace them but to eliminate the evidence of his betrayal. Because that's what she was, wasn't it? Evidence. Proof that the mighty Alpha King had broken his own laws. Had touched an Omega outside of a claiming bond. Had created life with someone who wasn't his mate. Pack law was absolute on this. Unauthorized offspring of the royal line were to be eliminated. The bloodline could not be polluted. The succession could not be questioned. And when the true heir arrived, the one born of Alexandros and Ione's sacred bond, there could be no pretenders, no complications, no bastards with golden eyes and prophecy threaded through their bones. Callista had started shifting 3 days ago. Talia had been hanging laundry when she'd heard her daughter's scream turn into something else, a sound no 3-year-old should make. She'd dropped the sheets and run, her heart in her throat, and found Callista in the garden. Tiny hands turned to tiny paws, her face elongated, for sprouting silver white across her shoulders. The shift hadn't completed. Callista was too young, her bones too soft. She'd stayed trapped between forms, whimpering, terrified, calling for her mama in a voice that was half human, half wolf. Talia had spent 4 hours talking her down, singing the old lullabies, the ones her own mother had sung before the sickness took her. Slowly, painfully, Callista had shifted back. But the damage was done. A shepherd had seen. A boy from the village had been watching from the road. By nightfall everyone knew. By dawn the enforcers arrived. They came with silver chains and cold eyes. 6 of them, wearing the king's sigil on their armor. The lead enforcer was a woman named Petra. Talia recognized her from the palace, from the days when Talia had been stupid enough to believe she belonged there. Petra had always hated her. The feeling was mutual. "Talia of no house," Petra announced, her voice carrying the weight of official decree. "You are summoned before the Council of Elders to answer for crimes against the pack. Unauthorized breeding with the royal line. Concealment of a bloodline heir. Violation of succession law." Callista had been hiding behind Talia's skirts, her small body trembling. She didn't understand. How could she? She was 3 years old. She didn't know that her existence was illegal, that her first breath had been an act of treason. Talia had knelt down, cupped her daughter's face and whispered, "Be brave, little star. Like we practiced." They'd practiced this. Course they had. Talia had known this day would come. Had prepared Callista for it in the only way she could, with stories disguised as games, with lessons wrapped in songs. If the bad men come, you run to the old oak. You climb to the hollow where the owls nest. You hide until I call your name 3 times. You don't come out for anyone else. Not even if they sound like me. But Callista's small voice had cracked. "Mama, I'm scared." "I know, my love. But you're so brave." Petra had watched this exchange with something like disgust twisting her features. The child comes too. Council's orders. She's 3 years old. She's an abomination. Pack law is clear. Talia's wolf had stirred then, that broken silent thing that had been sleeping for 3 years. It rose inside her like a storm surge, protective and feral and ready to die. Her eyes must have flashed because Petra's hand went to her blade. "Don't," Petra warned. "You'll only make it worse." What Petra didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that it couldn't get worse. They were going to kill Callista. That was the only outcome the law allowed. And Talia would burn the entire kingdom down before she let them touch her daughter. But she couldn't fight 6 enforcers. Not weakened as she was, her wolf still shattered. Her body still human fragile from years without a pack bond to strengthen her. So she'd done the only thing she could. She'd taken Callista's hand and walked with her head high, pretending she wasn't marching her daughter to an execution. The journey to the capital took 3 days. They traveled in a covered wagon, silver chains around Talia's wrists. Callista pressed against her side, asking questions in that relentless way children do. "Why are we going to the big city, Mama? Will there be pretty buildings? Can we get honey cakes? Will I see Papa?" That last question had been a knife between Talia's ribs. She'd never told Callista who her father was. Had only said he was a good man who couldn't be with them. But children weren't stupid. Callista had seen other families in the village. Had asked why she didn't have a papa like the other children. "Maybe," Talia had whispered, because she didn't have the heart to lie. "Maybe you'll see him." She didn't add, "right before they kill you." The capital hadn't changed. Still magnificent. Still brutal. The palace rose against the mountains like a crown of white stone and dark timber, banners bearing the royal crest snapping in the wind. The streets were crowded with pack members going about their lives, shopping, training, gossiping. They barely glanced at the wagon carrying the Omega and her illegal child. Why would they? Executions happened all the time. The Council of Elders convened in the old ceremonial hall, the one with the domed ceiling painted with the history of their people. Talia had been here once before, 3.5 years ago, when she'd been foolish enough to tell Alexandros she was pregnant. He'd brought her here, had stood before these same elders, and had tried to argue for her protection. They'd laughed at him, reminded him that he was not yet king. His father still held the throne then, and that pack law superseded even royal preference. An Omega bred outside a claiming bond was to be exiled at best, executed at worst. The child was to be eliminated regardless. Alexandros had raged. Talia remembered that. She'd never seen him lose control before, but he'd shifted partially right there in the hall, his wolf rising with such dominance that half the elders had dropped to their knees. He'd roared that she was under his protection, that anyone who touched her would answer to him, that pack law could burn for all he cared. His father, the old king, had slapped him, actually struck his heir across the face in front of the entire council. And then he'd said the words that ended everything. "You do not have a choice, my son. Your true mate arrives at the next moon. The gods have spoken. You will bond with Ione of Sparta, and you will forget this Omega. That is not a request." Alexandros had looked at Talia then, really looked at her, and she'd seen it in his eyes, the exact moment he chose duty over love, the exact moment he let her go. She'd run. What else could she do? She'd fled the palace that night, had stolen a horse, had ridden until she collapsed from exhaustion in a human village where no one knew her name. Now, standing in that same hall with Callista's hand gripping hers, Talia felt the weight of 3 years crash down on her shoulders. The elders sat in their high-backed chairs, 12 of them ancient and severe. The head elder, a man named Christos who'd been old even when Talia was a child, gestured for her to step forward. "Talia of no house, you stand accused of crimes against the pack. How do you answer?" She could have begged, could have pleaded, could have thrown herself on their mercy. But Talia had learned long ago that mercy was a myth. So she lifted her chin and said, "I answer that I loved him, and I won't apologize for it." A murmur rippled through the hall. Christos's expression didn't change. "The law does not care for love. You bore a child of the royal bloodline without sanction. You concealed her existence. You violated succession protocol. These crimes carry the death penalty. Then execute me. But let my daughter live. The child is the crime." Callista whimpered. Talia squeezed her hand, a silent promise. "I won't let them hurt you." That's when the doors opened, and Alexandros walked in. Talia's breath stopped. She stopped. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe, how to think, how to be anything other than a girl looking at the boy who'd ruined her for anyone else. He'd changed. Gods, he'd changed. 3 years had carved away the softness she remembered, leaving behind something harder, sharper, more king than man. His hair was longer, pulled back in the traditional warrior style. He wore the crown now. His father had died 2 years ago, she'd heard, and it sat on his head like it belonged there. But his eyes, those golden eyes that Callista had inherited, they found Talia across the hall, and for just a second, one fragile, impossible second, she saw the boy she'd loved, the one who'd held her in the rain and promised her forever. Then it was gone, buried under 3 years of distance and duty and a bond to another woman. "The council will pause," Alexandros announced, his voice carrying the absolute authority of an alpha king. "I need to speak with the accused." Christos frowned. "Your Majesty, this is highly irregular." "I said pause." The elders exchanged glances but ultimately bowed their heads. They knew better than to challenge him directly. Alexandros had proven himself a formidable king in the 2 years since his coronation. Fair but ruthless. Protective of his pack but uncompromising on the law. Which meant Talia had no idea why he'd just stopped her execution. The hall cleared. Guards remained at the doors, but everyone else filtered out, leaving Talia and Callista standing in the center of the chamber, while Alexandros descended from the raised platform where the throne sat. Each step echoed. Callista pressed closer to Talia's legs, her small voice barely audible. "Mama, who is he?" Talia's throat closed. She couldn't answer. couldn't force the words past the grief lodged in her chest. Alexandros stopped 3 feet away. His eyes moved from Talia to Callista, and Talia watched his expression crack, just for a moment. Watched him see his daughter for the first time. Callista, brave little Callista, stared up at him with those golden eyes they shared and said, "Are you my papa?" The sound Alexandros made was barely human. Something between a gasp and a sob, strangled in his throat. He actually dropped to one knee so he was at Callista's level, his hands shaking where they hung at his sides. "What's your name?" His voice was wrecked. "Callista. I'm 3.5. I can count to 20. Do you want to hear?" He nodded, mute, and Callista began counting with serious concentration, occasionally skipping numbers or repeating ones she particularly liked. Alexandros listened like she was reciting prophecy. When she finished, he whispered, "You're perfect." Callista beamed. Then, with the brutal honesty of children, asked, "Why did you leave us?" Alexandros's head dropped. His shoulders shook. And Talia realized with dawning horror that the Alpha King was crying. "I didn't know," he said hoarsely. "I didn't know about you. Your mother. She left before I could." "Before you could what?" Talia's voice came out sharp, bitter. "Before you could reject us properly. Before you could order my execution yourself." His head snapped up. "I never wanted. You never wanted. You stood in this hall 3 years ago and let them exile me. You chose your mate bond over. I had no choice." The roar echoed through the chamber. Callista flinched. Alexandros immediately gentled, his hand reaching toward his daughter but stopping short, not daring to touch. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to yell." Talia pulled Callista behind her, protective instinct overriding everything else. "You had a choice. You always had a choice. You chose duty. You chose the pack. You chose her. The mate bond isn't a choice, Talia. When it snapped into place, He stopped, dragged a hand through his hair. "It doesn't matter. You left. You disappeared. I searched for months. When I couldn't find you, I thought maybe you'd died." She laughed, cold and sharp. "Sorry to disappoint you. That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" He stood, towering over her now, and the dominance rolled off him in waves, not threatening but pleading, desperate. "I meant that I mourned you. Every single day. Do you understand that? The bond to Ione is real. There. But it's not. You weren't." "Finish that sentence." "You weren't replaceable." The words hung between them like smoke. Talia wanted to scream, wanted to rage, wanted to hurt him the way she'd been hurt. But Callista was right there, listening to every word, and Talia wouldn't destroy her daughter's image of her father before she'd even gotten to know him. So she swallowed it down. All the pain, all the fury, buried it deep. "It doesn't matter now," she said quietly. "They're going to execute us. Both of us. Pack law is clear." "No." Alexandros's voice turned to steel. "That's not happening. You can't stop the law. I'm the king. I am the law. Not above the council. Not above succession rights. Our daughter is illegal, Alexandros. Her existence threatens Ione's future children. You know the law won't allow her to live." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Then I'll change the law. You can't just watch me." He turned on his heel and strode toward the doors, throwing them open with enough force they slammed against the walls. His voice carried back into the hall. "Reconvene the council. And summon my wife." Talia's stomach dropped. Course. Uni. The queen would have to be present for any decision regarding threats to her future heirs. This was going to be a disaster. The council reconvened within the hour. This time, the gallery was full. Word had spread that the Alpha King was challenging the law itself, and half the palace had come to watch. Talia stood in the center again, Callista beside her, while Alexandros took his place on the throne. And beside him in the queen's seat sat Ione. She was even more beautiful than the rumors suggested. Tall and regal, with the bearing of someone born to power. She wore armor even in the council chamber, a breastplate of burnished bronze, leather bracers, a sword at her hip. Her dark hair was braided in the Spartan style, severe and elegant. Her eyes, when they landed on Talia, were absolutely cold. No hatred, no jealousy, just nothing. Like Talia was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. Clinical, efficient, terrifying. Christos called the chamber to order. Your Majesty, you wished to address the council. Alexandros stood, and the room fell silent. When an Alpha King stood to speak, you listened. I challenge the execution order. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Christos frowned. On what grounds? The child is of my blood. Pack law protects bloodline heirs. Pack law protects legitimate heirs. This child was conceived outside a claiming bond, before your ascension, with an Omega who had no right. She had every right, Alexandros interrupted, his voice cracking like thunder. I gave her that right when I chose to be with her. The chamber erupted. Voices overlapping, scandalized whispers, shocked gasps. Talia stood frozen, unable to process what she was hearing. Was he actually defending her? In front of the entire court. Ione remained perfectly still, her expression unreadable. Christos raised a hand for silence. Your Majesty, with respect, your personal feelings do not supersede. I'm not talking about feelings. I'm talking about rights. About justice. This child is innocent. She didn't choose to be born. And I will not allow her to be punished for my mistakes. Your Majesty, another elder spoke up, a woman named Daphne, known for her strict interpretation of Pack law. The law exists to protect the purity of the bloodline, to prevent succession disputes. Your own future heirs will be no more legitimate than Callista. Dead silence. Ione's head turned slowly toward her husband. If she was shocked, she didn't show it. But something flickered in her eyes. Calculation, maybe. Or warning. Alexandros continued, his voice unwavering. Blood is blood. Callista carries my lineage, just as any child I father with Queen Ione will. To execute her is to say that some of my children are worthy and others are not. I will not make that distinction. Christos leaned forward. Then what do you propose? I propose we acknowledge her, officially, as a daughter of the royal house. Not in the line of succession, I understand the complications there. But alive, protected, given a place in the pack. The murmurs returned, louder now. Talia's mind spun. Was this real? Was he really trying to save Callista? But at what cost? Daphne spoke again. And what of the mother? The Omega who broke the law? Alexandros's jaw tightened. She was protecting her child. Any parent would have done the same. That is not an answer, Your Majesty. Well, it wasn't. And Talia knew why he was avoiding it. 'Cause there was no good answer. If he pardoned her completely, the council would revolt. If he executed her, Callista would grow up knowing her father had killed her mother. There was no winning this. That's when Ione stood. Every eye turned to her. She moved with the grace of a warrior, descending from the throne platform to stand before the council. When she spoke, her voice was measured, powerful, absolute. I would like to address the council. Christos bowed his head. Of course, Your Majesty. Ione turned to face Talia directly. They stood 10 feet apart, Queen and Omega, everything and nothing. Talia forced herself not to look away, even though every instinct screamed at her to lower her eyes, to submit. You loved my husband, Ione said. Not a question. Talia swallowed. Yes. And he loved you. Yes. Ione nodded slowly, as if confirming something she'd already known. Then she turned to Alexandros. Is it true that you searched for her after I arrived? He looked stricken but nodded. For months. I couldn't find her. And if you'd found her before our bonding ceremony. The question hung in the air like a blade. Alexandros opened his mouth, closed it. The answer was written all over his face. He didn't know. He truly didn't know if he would have chosen Talia or honored the mate bond destiny had given him. Ione smiled, cold, knowing. That's what I thought. She turned back to the council. Pack law exists for a reason. To protect us. To ensure strong leadership. But it is also meant to be just. This Omega committed no crime beyond loving a man who loved her back. The child is innocent. And my husband is right. Blood is blood. Talia's breath caught. Was the queen actually defending them? However, Ione continued, and Talia's hope shattered before it fully formed. However, precedent must be maintained. If we simply pardon this woman, we tell the pack that laws can be broken without consequence. That royal favor can override justice. Christos nodded approvingly. Precisely our concern, Your Majesty. Therefore, I propose a compromise. The word echoed through the chamber. Alexandros leaned forward on his throne, tension radiating from his frame. Ione spoke clearly, ensuring every word carried. The child will be acknowledged as a daughter of the king's blood. She will be given a place in the royal household, educated and protected, but removed from the line of succession. This protects both her life and the clarity of future inheritance. Relief flooded Talia's chest. Callista would live. Her daughter would live. But Ione wasn't finished. As for the mother, she will accept exile. Permanent and absolute. She may not remain in Packlands. She may not contact the child. She will be dead to us. No. No. Talia's vision blurred. Her knees wanted to buckle. Callista made a small, confused sound, tugging at her mother's dress. Ione met Talia's eyes again, and there was something almost apologetic in her expression. Almost. It is the only way to satisfy both mercy and justice. The child lives. You live. But you cannot both remain. You're taking my daughter from me. Talia's voice came out broken, barely audible. I'm saving your daughter's life. Yours. You should be grateful. Grateful. She wanted Talia to be grateful that she got to live while her child grew up thinking she'd been abandoned. Grateful that Callista would call another woman mother. Grateful that she'd spend the rest of her life knowing her daughter was alive but forever out of reach. This wasn't mercy. This was torture. Alexandros stood abruptly. No. There has to be another way. Ione turned to him, and for the first time there was heat in her voice. You want another way? Fine. Execute them both. Or pardon them both and watch the council strip your authority. Or accept my compromise, which gives everyone something and costs everyone something. She stepped closer to him, her voice dropping but still audible throughout the chamber. You brought this on yourself, husband. When you touched her. When you created that child. These are the consequences. Choose. The silence that followed was suffocating. Callista started crying. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but quiet, heartbroken tears that destroyed Talia more thoroughly than any execution could. Her daughter knew. Somehow, she understood that something terrible was happening. Mama! Callista's small voice wavered. Mama, I don't want to stay here. I want to go home. Talia dropped to her knees, gathering Callista into her arms, breathing in the scent of her. Sunshine and wildflowers and innocence. I know, baby. I know. Can we go home now? Soon, Talia lied, her tears falling into Callista's hair. Soon. Christos cleared his throat. The council must vote. All in favor of Queen Ione's proposal. 11 hands raised. Only one abstained. An elder Talia didn't recognize. It was done. Christos stood. Then by order of this council and with the consent of the throne, the following is decreed. The child called Callista will be recognized as royal blood and placed under the king's protection. The Omega Talia will be exiled beyond Pack borders by sunset tomorrow. Any attempt to return or contact the child will result in immediate execution. So it is spoken. So it shall be. The gavel came down. The sound echoed forever. Talia was given one night. One single night to say goodbye to 3 years of motherhood. They locked her in a guest chamber, nicer than anywhere she'd lived in exile, which felt like an insult, and brought Callista to her as the sun set. Her daughter was confused, frightened, asking questions Talia couldn't answer. Why can't I come with you? When will I see you again? Did I do something wrong? That last one broke her. No, my darling. Well, you did nothing wrong. You're perfect. You're so perfect. Then why do you have to go? Because the world is cruel. Because your father is a king and kings don't get to keep the things they love. Because I wasn't strong enough to protect us. Because sometimes grown-ups have to make very hard choices. And I'm choosing to make sure you're safe. You'll live here in the palace. You'll have everything you need. You'll learn and grow and become someone amazing. But I want you. I know. Gods, I know. Talia held her tighter, memorizing the weight of her, the warmth, the sound of her breathing. But you'll have your father. He's a good man, Callista. He'll take care of you. And you'll have the queen. Be strong. She'll teach you to be strong too. I don't want to be strong. I want my mama. Talia sang to her then. The old lullabies. The ones her own mother had sung, passed down through generations of women who'd loved and lost and survived anyway. She sang until Callista's eyes grew heavy, until her daughter's breathing evened out in sleep. And then she held her through the night, watching the hours slip away like water through her fingers. When dawn came, they took Callista away while she was still sleeping. It was a mercy, they said. Easier if the child didn't see her mother leave. Talia wanted to rage, fight, to shift and tear them all apart. But she'd made a deal. Callista's life for her absence. And she would honor it even if it killed her. They gave her a horse, supplies for 3 days, and a map marked with the borders she could never cross. The head guard, Petra of course, delivered her to the border personally, ensuring there would be no mistakes. As Talia mounted the horse, Petra said quietly, "For what it's worth, I think the queen's ruling was fair. A child lives. You live. It could have been worse." Talia looked at her with dead eyes. Go to hell. She rode north into the territories where the pack's influence faded, where rogues and humans mingled in lawless towns. She rode until her body gave out from exhaustion, until she couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten or slept. When she finally stopped, in a nameless village that smelled like smoke and desperation, she collapsed in the stable of an inn. The owner found her the next morning, delirious with fever, whispering her daughter's name over and over. He took her in. This stranger. This human man named Theron who asked no questions and expected nothing. He gave her a room above the stable, food when she could eat, silence when she couldn't. It took her 3 months to speak more than a few words. 6 months before she could make it through a day without breaking down. A year before she could think of Callista without wanting to die. The worst part was not knowing. Not seeing her daughter grow. Not hearing her voice. Not knowing if Callista remembered her at all. Sometimes on very dark nights, Talia would dream. She'd dream that Callista had forgotten her completely. That the palace had given her everything. Love, safety, comfort, and the memory of her mother had faded like morning mist. Other times she'd dream the opposite. That Callista cried herself to sleep asking for her mama. That she grew up angry, bitter, wondering why she'd been abandoned. Talia didn't know which dream was worse. 2 years passed this way. Talia worked in Theron's inn, serving drinks and avoiding questions. The humans in this town didn't know what she was, and she intended to keep it that way. Her wolf was still silent, that broken, hollow thing that had never recovered from the double loss of mate and child. She existed. That was all. Until the night the scouts arrived. They came to the inn looking for lodging, 3 of them, wearing the colors of the southern packs. Talia had learned to recognize pack wolves, even in human form. They carried themselves differently. moved with predator grace. She kept her head down, served their drinks, tried to be invisible. But one of them, a young woman with scars on her arms, stopped her as she turned to leave. "Wait. I know you." Talia's blood froze. "I don't think so." "No, I do. You're gods, you're the Omega. The one from the trial." The other two scouts looked up sharply. All three were staring at her now, recognition dawning. "You have me confused with someone else," Talia said, backing toward the kitchen. The scarred woman stood. "You had a daughter, Callista. The king's bastard." Bastard. The word hit like a fist. Talia's hand shook. "I don't know what you're talking about. Is she alive?" The woman pressed forward, not threatening but urgent. "The child. We heard rumors she was executed despite the king's protection. Is it true?" The question stole Talia's breath. "What? Well, she's alive. She's in the palace." She stopped, realization crashing down. "Why are you asking me this?" The three scouts exchanged glances. The scarred woman spoke carefully. "Because if she's alive, she's in danger. The Queen Ione, she's been consolidating power, removing threats to her future heirs. And a royal bastard with king's blood. That's a significant threat." "Well, no, Ione had given her word. The council had ruled. Callista was protected." "You're lying." "Why would we lie? We're not even from the Central Pack. We don't have stakes in palace politics. We're just messengers passing through, and we've heard things. Troubling things." Talia's world tilted. "What things?" The scarred woman glanced at her companions, then back to Talia. 3 royal advisors have died in the past 6 months. All accidents officially. A fall from a horse. Poisoned wine meant for someone else. A training incident. But all 3 had one thing in common. They'd publicly supported the king's decision to acknowledge his bastard daughter. The word kept coming back. Bastard. Like a brand. Like a target. "The queen wouldn't," Talia whispered, but even as she said it, she remembered Ione's cold eyes. Her clinical assessment. The way she'd looked at Callista like a problem to be solved. "The queen is Spartan," the woman said quietly. "They don't leave loose ends. They don't allow threats to fester. And a child with the king's blood who isn't hers. That's not just a loose end. That's a future civil war waiting to happen." Talia's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the bench, her mind racing. Callista was 5 now. 5 years old. Old enough to ask questions. Old enough to understand she was different. Old enough to be dangerous to someone who saw threats everywhere. "I need to go back," Talia said, standing abruptly. "You can't," one of the other scouts said, a man with kind eyes. "You were exiled. If you cross the border, they'll execute you on sight." "I don't care. Your daughter will care. She'll watch them kill her mother." "Is that what you want?" "Well, gods no." But she couldn't just do nothing. Couldn't sit here in safety while Callista walked around with a target on her back. The scarred woman pulled something from her pocket. A small token, carved wood with a sigil Talia didn't recognize. "Take this. There's a resistance building. Wolves who think the old laws are too rigid. Who believe the king should have more power than the council. They're based in the Eastern Territories. Show them this, tell them Maya sent you. They might be able to help." "A resistance." Talia took the token with shaking hands. "You mean rebels. We mean survivors. The queen's reach is long, but it's not infinite. There are still places she can't touch. People she can't control." Maya's expression softened. "Your daughter is alive now. Let's try to keep her that way." They left before dawn. Talia stood at the window of her small room, clutching the wooden token, watching the sky lighten from black to gray to pale gold. Theron found her there an hour later. "You're leaving," he said. "Not a question. I have to. I know." He pressed a small pouch into her hands. "Coin. Enough to get you wherever you're going. And this. A knife, small but wickedly sharp. In case coin isn't enough." Talia looked at this man who'd taken her in when she had nothing, who'd asked for nothing in return. "Why are you helping me?" He smiled sadly. "I had a daughter once. Lost her to sickness when she was small. If there was any chance to save her, I'd have burned the world down." He touched her shoulder briefly. "Go save yours." The journey east took 3 weeks. Talia traveled carefully, avoiding packed territories, sticking to human roads and neutral zones. The token Maya had given her got her past 2 checkpoints, guards who saw the sigil and waved her through without questions. The resistance was headquartered in an old fortress carved into a mountainside, hidden by forest and defended by wolves who looked more like warriors than rebels. They challenged her at the gate, but when she showed the token and spoke Maya's name, they let her in. The leader was a woman named Dion, older, scarred, with gray streaking her dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. She listened to Talia's story without interruption, her expression unreadable. When Talia finished, Dion said simply, "Your daughter is still alive." Relief nearly drove Talia to her knees. "You're sure? We have people in the palace." "Not many, but enough. The king keeps Callista close. She's being trained in combat, politics, pack law. He's raising her like a true heir, despite the succession ruling." "And the queen?" Dion's expression darkened. "The queen is patient. She hasn't made a move yet because she's still establishing her own power base. But she's pregnant now. Due in 3 months. Once she has an heir of her own." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Once Ione had her own child, Callista became expendable. Worse than expendable, threatening. "I need to get her out," Talia said. "Before the baby is born. Before Ione makes her move. That's suicide. Palace is locked down. Even if you could get in, you'd never get out with the child. Then I'll die trying." Dion studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. "You know what? I believe you would." She stood, pacing to the window. "We've been planning something. An infiltration during the Winter Solstice Festival. The palace opens to delegates from all the territories. Security is tight but not impossible. We were going to use it to plant informants, maybe steal some documents." He turned back. "But extracting a child? That's ambitious. Can it be done? With the right team, the right timing, and a massive amount of luck? Maybe. But you understand what you're asking. If we fail, we don't just die. We start a war. The queen will use it as justification to purge anyone she considers disloyal. Hundreds could die." Talia met her eyes. "And if we do nothing, my daughter dies. I understand the stakes. I'm asking anyway." Dion laughed, short and sharp. "I like you. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Possibly both." She extended her hand. "We'll do it. But you follow my orders exactly. No improvisation. No heroic nonsense. We get in, we get the girl, we get out. Understood?" Talia gripped her hand. "Understood." They spent 2 months planning. Learning the palace layout, guard rotations, weak points in the security. The team would be small. 6 people including Talia. Any more and they'd be too noticeable. Dion insisted Talia train. "You've been living as human for 2 years. Your instincts are dull. Your wolf is broken. We need to fix that or you'll get everyone killed." The training was brutal. Combat, stealth, strategy. Dion pushed her past every limit, forcing her body to remember what it had been before grief broke it. And slowly, painfully, Talia's wolf began to stir. Not healed, not whole, but awake. Where? Angry. But she would need that anger. The winter solstice arrived with snow and celebration. The palace was transformed. Banners and lights, music and laughter. Delegates from across the territories arrived in ceremonial dress, bearing gifts for the king and queen. Talia arrived with the southern delegation, disguised as a servant. Her hair was dyed dark, her scent masked with herbs. She kept her eyes down and her presence small. Getting into the palace was easy. Getting to Callista would be harder. The child was being kept in the royal wing, the most secure part of the palace. But Dion's intelligence had revealed a pattern. Every evening, Callista was taken to the library for lessons. The route passed through a servants' corridor that connected to the kitchens. That was their window. They waited until the third day of the festival, when security was relaxed from 3 days of nothing happening. Talia's team positioned themselves throughout the palace. 2 at the exits, 1 monitoring guards, 1 watching the queen, and Dion staying with Talia for the extraction. At sunset they made their move. The servants' corridor was dark and narrow. Talia's heart hammered as she heard footsteps approaching, a guard escort and smaller steps that had to be Callista. Dion signaled, "Wait." They let the group pass, counted to 10, then followed. The plan was to intercept them at the junction where the corridor branched. 1 path to the library, 1 to the kitchens. Create a distraction, grab the child, disappear into the kitchen chaos. But plans never survived contact with reality. As they reached the junction, the guard stopped suddenly. "Turn." His nostrils flared. He'd scented something wrong. "Run!" Dion shoved Talia forward. "Get the girl." Everything happened too fast. The guard shifted, his wolf erupting in the narrow corridor. Dion met him head-on, her own shift smooth and practiced. The sound of snarling filled the space. And there, pressed against the wall, eyes wide with terror, was Callista. She was so much bigger than Talia remembered. 5 years old now, all long limbs and serious expression. She wore palace clothes, fine wool and soft leather, and her hair was braided in the royal style. But her eyes, those golden eyes, they found Talia in the chaos and went impossibly wide. "Mama!" The word was a whisper, barely audible over the fighting. But Talia heard it, felt it in her bones. "Callista!" She dropped to her knees, reaching out. "Baby, I need you to come with me." "You left." Callista's voice cracked. "You left me." "I know. I'm so sorry. But I'm here now. And we need to go. Right now." Behind them, Dion was losing. The guard was bigger, stronger, and reinforcements would arrive any second. They had maybe 30 seconds. Callista didn't move. "Papa said you had to leave. That it was the law." "Your papa was right. But the law is wrong. And you're in danger, sweetheart. Please, trust me. I don't know you anymore." The words hit like a blade. Talia had known this might happen. Had known Callista might not remember, might not trust her. But hearing it was different than knowing it. "You're right," Talia said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You don't know me. But I know you. I know you count to 20 but always skip 15. I know you love honey cakes. I know you used to wake up crying from nightmares and the only thing that helped was when I sang to you." Callista's expression cracked. "The lullabies." "Yes, the lullabies." Talia started singing, soft and quick, the melody their grandmother had taught them. "Sleep now, little star, safe beneath the moon." "Mama." This time it wasn't a question. It was recognition. Memory flooding back. "That's right, baby. It's me. Now come on. We have to." The blade came out of nowhere. Talia saw the flash of silver, heard Callista scream, and then there was pain, sharp and deep and spreading through her side like fire. She looked down and saw the knife buried between her ribs, held by a hand she recognized. Petra. The guard who'd escorted her to exile. Who'd been waiting for exactly this. "Did you really think we wouldn't expect this?" Petra twisted the blade. Talia gasped, her legs buckling. "The queen knew you'd try. She's been waiting." Talia fell. The stone floor was cold against her cheek. She could hear Callista screaming, hear Dion roaring, hear more guards arriving. The mission had failed. They were all going to die. But Callista was here. Her daughter was right here. And Talia could see her one more time. That was enough. Blood pooled beneath her. So much blood. Petra pulled the knife free and Talia felt her life spilling out with it. Her wolf howled. Not broken anymore but dying. They were finally going to be at peace. Callista broke away from the guard holding her and collapsed beside Talia. "Mama, no, no, no." It's okay, Talia whispered. Speaking hurt. Breathing hurt. Everything hurt. It's okay, little star. Don't leave me again. Please don't leave me again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Talia raised one shaking hand to touch her daughter's face. She was crying now, this little girl who'd grown so much, who'd become someone Talia barely knew. You have to be brave now. So brave. I don't want to be brave. I want you. Talia could feel it, the darkness at the edges pulling her down. She was cold, so cold. But Callista was warm, and she held on to that warmth with everything she had left. She started singing. Her voice barely above a breath, blood bubbling in her throat, but she sang the lullaby anyway. Sleep now, little star, safe beneath the moon. Morning comes with light, chasing away the gloom. Callista joined in, her voice breaking, sobbing through the words their family had passed down through generations. Mother and daughter singing together one last time. The night may be dark, but you are not alone. Talia's vision was fading. She could hear shouting, running footsteps, someone roaring with a voice that sounded like thunder. But it was distant, unimportant. All that mattered was this moment. This last gift she could give her daughter. I will hold you close until you find your home. The last word came out as a sigh. Talia's hand fell from Callista's face. And then there was nothing. Alexandros felt it the moment she died. Not through a bond that had never existed between them, but through something deeper, something that predated pack law and made bonds and every rule they'd built to keep them apart. He felt her life extinguish like a candle in the wind, and the roar that tore from his throat shattered every window in the palace. He was in the throne room, presiding over some diplomatic nonsense he couldn't even remember now. The feeling hit him like a physical blow, drove him to his knees, and then he was running. Shifting mid-stride, his wolf taking over, following the scent of blood and death and the daughter he'd failed to protect. He found them in the servants' corridor. Talia lay in a pool of blood, her eyes open and empty, one hand still reaching toward Callista. Their daughter was collapsed over her mother's body, sobbing, singing that damned lullaby through her tears. Guards surrounded them. His guards, who'd killed the woman he'd loved because they were following orders. Whose orders? Alexandros shifted back to human, barely noticing his nakedness. He dropped to his knees beside them, his hands shaking as he reached for Talia. Her skin was already cooling. He was too late. He was always too late. No, he whispered. No. Talia, please. But she was gone. And Callista was staring at him with those golden eyes they shared. Her small face streaked with tears and her mother's blood, and the look in her eyes would haunt him forever. Betrayal. Pure and absolute. You did this, Callista said, her voice small and broken and full of hate. You killed her. No. I didn't know. You sent her away. You let them hurt her. You killed her. The accusation hit harder than any blade. 'Cause she was right. He hadn't driven the knife, but he'd created the circumstances that led to this moment. His choices, his laws, his failure to protect the people he loved from the system he upheld. He gathered Talia's body into his arms, cradling her against his chest. She was so light. Had she always been this light? Or had exile and grief hollowed her out until there was nothing left? I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry. I should have chosen you. I should have fought harder. I should have. But should-haves didn't bring back the dead. Dion was still alive, barely. She'd killed 2 guards before they'd brought her down. She looked at Alexandros from where she lay bleeding and laughed, bitter and knowing. The mighty Alpha King. Too late again. Just like always. Alexandros wanted to rage at her, to demand answers, to know who'd organized this, how they'd known. But the words wouldn't come. He just held Talia and felt something inside him break beyond repair. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Ione appeared, flanked by more guards. She was heavily pregnant, moving carefully, one hand on her swollen belly. She looked at the scene before her. The dead Omega, the sobbing child, her husband cradling his former lover, and her expression revealed nothing. So she came back, Ione said calmly. I warned you she would try. Alexandros's head snapped up. You knew. Of course I knew. I've been monitoring rebel activities for months. Did you think I'd leave a loose end like her alive without surveillance? She stepped closer, her hand still on her belly. She was a threat. To our future. To our child. I did what was necessary. You ordered this. I ensured our safety. There's a difference. Alexandros stood slowly, still holding Talia's body. His wolf was rising, feral and grief-mad. The dominance that rolled off him made every guard in the corridor drop to their knees. Even Ione tensed. You murdered her. I protected our bloodline. That's my duty as queen. Your duty. He laughed, and the sound was broken glass. You talk about duty while she bleeds out in a servant's corridor? While our daughter, my daughter, watches her mother die. That bastard is not. Say it again. His voice was barely human. Call her a bastard one more time and I will forget you're carrying my child. Ione's eyes widened. For the first time since he'd known her, she looked uncertain. Alexandros. Get out. This is my palace too. Get out. She went. The guards followed. Even Dion's rebels were dragged away, leaving Alexandros alone with Talia's body and his daughter who wouldn't look at him. Callista, he tried. Let me. Don't touch me. She moved away from him, pressing herself against the wall. Don't ever touch me. Please. I know you're hurt. I know you're angry. But I can explain. Explain what? That you sent my mama away. That you let the queen hurt her. That you chose everyone else over us. Callista's voice rose, cracking with pain. She came back for me. She almost died getting to me. And you did nothing. The words flayed him. I didn't know she was here. You should have. You're the king. You're supposed to protect people. You're supposed to protect me. I am trying to protect you. By killing my mother. Alexandros had no answer. What could he say? That pack law mattered more than love. That duty superseded family. That he'd made choices that led directly to this moment. And now he had to live with the consequences. He looked down at Talia one more time. Her face was peaceful now at least. The pain was gone. But her eyes were still open, still staring at nothing, and he couldn't bear it. He closed them gently, pressed his forehead to hers, and whispered the words he'd never gotten to say. I loved you. I love you still. I will love you until the day I die. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Then he stood, holding her body, and walked through the palace. Nobles and servants parted before him, staring in shock at their king covered in blood, carrying a dead Omega through the halls. He didn't care. Let them stare. Let them whisper. Let them see what their precious laws had cost. He took her to his private chambers, the ones he shared with Ione, though she wouldn't dare come here tonight. He laid Talia on his bed and sat beside her, one hand in her cooling fingers, and waited for dawn. Callista followed eventually. She didn't speak to him, didn't acknowledge him. Just climbed onto the bed on Talia's other side and curled against her mother's body, still singing that lullaby through her tears. Alexandros sat there through the night, holding the hand of the woman he'd loved and listening to his daughter sing goodbye. When dawn came, he knew what he had to do. The council convened at his command. All 12 elders, summoned in the middle of the night, looking confused and concerned as Alexandros took the throne. He'd cleaned the blood off, dressed in formal armor, placed the crown on his head. He looked every inch a king. Ione was there too, standing beside the throne despite his wishes. She'd come to defend her actions, to argue they were necessary. She'd come to win. She would lose. By my authority as Alpha King, Alexandros began, his voice carrying through the chamber, I am dissolving the current Council of Elders. The room erupted. Shouts of protest, demands for explanation. Christos rose from his seat, furious. You cannot. I can. The dominance in his voice silenced them all. Pack law grants the Alpha King absolute authority in times of crisis. I am declaring this a crisis. The council is dissolved. Effective immediately. On what grounds? Daphne demanded. On the grounds that your laws killed an innocent woman last night. On the grounds that Pack law has become so twisted, so rigid, that it values rules over lives. On the grounds that I am king, and I will not allow this to continue. Ione stepped forward. Alexandros, what are you doing? He finally looked at her. This woman he'd bonded to, who carried his child, who he'd chosen duty over love to be with. What I should have done 3 years ago. He reached up and removed the crown. Set it on the throne. The entire room went silent. I am abdicating, he said clearly. Effective at the end of this week. The throne will pass to my daughter Callista, with Queen Ione serving as regent until she comes of age. You're insane, Ione breathed. You can't give the throne to her. She's not legitimate. She's not even in the succession line. I just changed the succession line. As Alpha King I have that right. And I'm using it. Callista is my acknowledged heir. She will be queen. And you, Ione, will ensure she's protected. Because if anything happens to her, anything at all, I will burn this kingdom to ash and salt the earth behind me. This is madness. This is justice. He picked up the crown again, holding it like a weapon. You wanted power. You have it. Rule with my blessing. But you will do so knowing that every decision you make will be judged against the memory of the woman you murdered. And when my daughter is old enough to rule, she will remember who killed her mother. And she will judge you accordingly. Ione's face had gone pale. You're threatening me. I'm warning you. There's a difference. He set the crown down again. The ceremony will be in 3 days. Prepare accordingly. He walked out of the chamber, leaving chaos behind. Let them fight over the details. Let them scramble to understand what had just happened. He didn't care anymore. He found Callista in his chambers, still sitting with Talia's body. Someone had cleaned her mother up, dressed her in white, made her look almost alive. Almost. Callista didn't look up when he entered. Are you really giving up? Yes. Why? Because being king means I couldn't save your mother. And I can't live with that. He sat beside her, careful not to crowd. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I need you to know, your mother loved you more than life itself. She came back for you knowing she'd die. That's how much you mattered to her. She whispered lullabies, Callista said softly, her small hand touching her mother's hair. While she was bleeding out. She was dying and she sang to me. Because she didn't want me to be scared. That sounds like her. I won't forget. Callista's voice hardened. I'm going to remember every single moment. And someday when I'm queen I'm going to change everything. I'm going to make sure what happened to her never happens again. Alexandros felt pride and heartbreak in equal measure. Good. That's good. I still hate you. I know. Maybe I'll always hate you. I know that too. They sat in silence while Talia's body grew cold, while the sun rose on a kingdom that didn't yet know its king was broken beyond repair, while a little girl who'd lost everything plotted a future where love wouldn't be sacrificed to duty. And somewhere in the space between grief and rage, between memory and promise, the lullaby echoed. Sleep now, little star, safe beneath the moon. Morning comes with light, chasing away the gloom. The night may be dark, but you are not alone. I will hold you close until you find your home. But Talia would never sing again.